Welcome to the Embodied Exploration Dialogue, hosted by me from the Present of Work. The Present of Work is a new nonprofit project where we want to invite ourselves, our loved ones, and the society to reimagine what work can be, to explore the full spectrum of the human experience of work. And today we will use this form of that I call embodied dialogue to explore a specific topic. And Benjamin, would you please share the slide? I just want to give people a view about what is this thing called embodied dialogue. Um, so, embodied dialogue, why I want to start having public discourses like this. You will see the first thing in the vibe and intention is to be in a dialogue to learn with other fellow humans, as opposed to convince, sell, pitch to others our own views or offerings. Um, the the reason I for this is because I see in our current public discourse, the content on YouTube or, any of those social discourses, so much of it is about convincing each other, is about debate. It's either this extreme kind of like polarization, or this, on the other hand, is about, oh, let's just pretend we all get along. Let's pretend we don't have differences. Let's pretend to be in harmony. And so then the conversation, the exploration stay at a very shallow surface. And so yeah, and then meanwhile, in a place like Limicon, in a place like the liminal space, in my own like network with collaborators, there's such a strong yearning for let's not talk for its talk's own sake. Let's bravely explore, think places within us and between us that feels alive without being constrained by egos, by limiting beliefs, by the need for popularity or conformity. So, so those are the reasons that I want to have and record this first hour of our conversation is to practice. It's not to just profess what we value, but really practice it. How does it mean to embody curiosity? What does it mean to really practice perspective taking while still honoring your voice? It's not about just trying to placate. We can still have real conflicts. We can still have real differences, but how are we gonna treat every conversation as a practice to really embody what we value? So those are the intentions, and then in a minute I'll welcome all of the guests in the inner circle. So the first hour will have a recorded dialogue among a few guests that I invited into the inner circle of the fishbowl, and then in the middle of the first hour, I will invite our poet or poets to chime in to invite the conversation to go deeper. So during the first hour, for those who are not in the fishbowl, you're welcome to share your questions, your sentiments, what you're sensing, what you're noticing in the chat. And the poet will pay attention to those. And then in, at the half an hour mark, the poet will invite the poet into the fishbowl to surface and to invite to be provocative or to be, to basically push the conversation to go deeper in the second half an hour. And then the second hour will be not recorded, and then we can, go deeper in our interactions with each other. And any questions about the form? And if you have questions, always feel free to put it in the chat too. And now I'm going to talk very quickly about the topic of today is convening systems. What does it take? What does it look like on the ground? What do we know? what do we not know. So it's not about what do we know, we have it all figured out, but I think sometimes it's more important to actually admit, what we don't know. So that then we can collectively identify the gap in how we are convening systems. So Um, yeah, so now I'll just invite I'll start inviting the people. Yeah, Benjamin, would you please now put invite BK into the spotlight? Christina, oh, by the way, BK, if you want to be a poet or be in the fishbowl, just let us know. Um, we'll invite James into the fishbowl. Can we all share spotlights? All of us, yes. And then Christina Bowen, Agnes. Yeah. And BK, do you want to be in the fishbowl? Oh, yeah, yeah, you are. All right. All right. So we have five guests in the fishbowl for the first hour. And yeah, I would also invite us um, to have a moment, does it may be 10 seconds, it may be however long, to center ourselves, to really invite us into a place where we're ready to explore deeper, to explore what we feel alive, what we don't know. And for that to emerge, silence and spaciousness is a good thing. Uh, and also, if you feel tension and anxiety about, anything, feel free to name it. That is also part of the human aliveness. If you feel agitated, feel free to, yeah, just name anything. Anything is welcome in this space. And if you have an intention for this dialogue practice, feel free to, name it now. To add your own intention into this dialogue practice.
I intend to practice being real and being unfiltered and being present in the moment.
Mm.
I intend to stay aware of the soles of my feet and practice embodiment.
And also, you don't have to name your intention. You can just keep it to yourself too. Anything is welcome.
And tend to um, let nourishment flow to where it's needed.
My head is going to messiness.
Mm,
I feel like there's going to be messiness in the practice. Um, and hopefully, my nervous system can also navigate it at the same time, is what's coming to me.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I'm both a host and a participant in the fishbowl. As a participant, I'm feeling nervousness in my system, and that makes me feel alive. That's my intention, to be alive. All right. Yeah, so let's dive in. Um, dive into convening systems. What does it look like on the ground? What is about? What does it mean? And we don't need to, specifically take turns. Um, yeah, just feel free to unmute and chime in. Um, Go with the flow.
Let's start with exploring messiness, riffing off of what Agnes said. I've been thinking a lot about this as I untangle the last of my parents' estate and sort through boxes and boxes of messiness. And I've realized that a lot of people see messiness as like drama, like a desire for drama or avoidance of your own issues or something like that. And I wonder what that means for introducing a complex systems view. Um, because there is like a really shadow side of messiness
Mm.
that is about that stuff. So, what does messiness look like when we approach it with a calm nervous system, when we approach it in a way that doesn't feed the drama, that just accepts, like, is a is a river system messy? I don't know. Is it really messy? Because messiness implies that it should be something else.
I'll note that I intend to keep my mic open, and I would invite you to share that with me and share an audio space so that I can feel more connected to you all.
You want some of our
Yeah.
messiness?
Yeah.
We may hear a teenage bass subwoofer in the background here.
Yeah. Yeah, Christina. The messiness point, it really reminds me of one of our, so um yeah, Agnes and I are, convening, are helping, to convene different organizations and network organizations or internally for organizations to convene this different stakeholders in the system. And people are, our clients, yeah, messiness is regarded as a drawback. And especially in this time, some of our clients are facing crises with regard to government funding, with regard to the political, social crises. And so messiness combined with anxiety is a lot to hold. When I'm in a meeting with a client who are trying to convene their system, I can feel that impact in my nervous system within the first 2 minutes of the meeting. Yeah, so I think oftentimes messiness is associated with anxiety and stress. And I do that too myself. Until hearing what you said, is Rivervet messy?
But to your
It's
point, like
yeah,
it is a riverbed messy
hmm,
after Hurricane Helene,
right.
right? There is an expectation that it should be something else,
Yes,
but also like things not fitting into an ordered list. Is that messy? I don't know.
yes.
Yeah, I'm like picturing like tangles
Mm.
when there's tangled webs, which is naturally messy to begin with. And is the point to untangle it? Or is the point to kind of see all the loops and its interconnections and kind of see it for what it is? Um, yeah, and I think the reaction is like, let's fix this tangle and straighten it out when maybe there's a counter reaction to maybe just leave it and understand it. And maybe there's something else to be had by having this ball of tangledness. Because the point is it maybe to follow where things lead.
I notice a desire to ground in concreteness,
Mm.
as well as, abstraction and metaphor. So maybe I'll try to just knock on the table of what is solid here in terms of convening and systems. Um, that could allow for a lot of abstraction and ambiguity, but I think when we talk about systems, we're talking about people. And to me, it's primarily people, mostly people. Yeah, there can be technical aspects and technological aspects to systems, um, but people, and we're talking about a system
Oh,
that's,
James, your
yeah,
mic all of a sudden.
okay. Someone else take over.
All right. Yeah, the people part. Uh,
People.
it's funny. I went to engineering school, even though I studied the social side of technology. I went to engineering school, and then on one of the professor's doors, it says, "The systems are great, except there's people in it." Only if there are no people. That's the best system ever.
Yeah. How does this sound?
Yeah,
Better?
it's great.
And with convening, I think we're talking about starting, initiating, calling, gathering together. So the art and science of beginning projects, starting organizations, convening
Mhm.
gatherings. Does that line up with y'all?
I
Yeah.
like this idea of knocking on the table of what is grounded, because so much of this work is seen as like fluffy or
Mm.
nebulous. And in my work doing adaptive strategy with collaborative groups, that act of convening, of calling in, is the act of creating a boundary. So if the boundary is like the planetary boundary and everybody's invited, but we're all on Earth, you can't do things when the boundary is like a bioregion or a home or a town or something. So what is the boundary? Who's invited is a very clear question. And then that boundary and the aim of the people who are invited to come together for what, in order to what. And then my first act after you have that initial sort of semi-nebulous boundary forming is to ask, is there a microcosm of the system in the room? Who's not at the table? Given what we say we want and who we say we're inviting, do we actually have them in the room?
For some reason, I'm thinking about food, um, and what it takes to, I guess, to bring people to the table. Um, from a place of like nourishing others. I think like food systems also makes me think of like what is a recipe? Like it's a collection of systems coming together in a pattern that we might enjoy, that we might put a name around. And I think like just like going through, how my local tomatoes, I like Roma tomatoes. They have like a certain tartness to them when I add them to my food. I like ginger, I kind of like beans in my soup, all coming from like different biological processes. And then there's like the uh, navigation of how do you bring those things together, and what are the kind of gestures you would need to make in a kind of imaginary pot to with the right temperature to produce something that is delicious and delightful for others. And I think when I think of cooking, in most senses, it's always kind of with other people in mind. And I almost feel like the invitation is something about sharing. Like there's a desire for others to kind of experience something that I'm drawn to or pulled by.
Yeah, Brandon, just hearing you talk about the food system, I somehow felt a sense of overwhelm of, oh, how do I convene a system like that? It's like all of these parts, logistic, a global logistic, and, your tomato comes from, could come from anywhere in the world. And then, yeah, linked to what Christina was saying, if we want to convene the system, who's not at the table? And then my mind went to, we don't have to solve that, but I just want to name my mind went to, then if we invite everyone to the table, then what? Like my everyday work of like actually convening these different systems with these different stakeholders is like, wow, we could have 120 people, on a
Mhm.
Zoom call. And then what? Like, how do I actually really integrate their voices? What if I invited people and they really told us what they want and their real voices, and then like we don't know how to integrate, right? Like how, yeah, so there is that sense of overwhelm. Um, but yeah, I don't need us to try to solve it. I just want to sense it so that maybe I can go deeper underneath that overwhelm.
Well, with that food example, when you say convene system, it's like how do you convene ingredients? Um, it almost like how do we just potluck together? Because the word convening already has so many connotations. Whether, yeah, there's just so many assumptions when we're convening, like then there's going to have to be a convener, and we're the convenees coming to this place. Um, and maybe there's another adjective that goes in front, or maybe that's the verb. What is the verb that goes before it? Systems. Potlucking is like the made up word that I'm making up. So bring what you have. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, whatever you have in your pantry, bring it in.
This does
Yeah.
this does seem to um I just want to say one of my favorite um like clarifications around systems and networks is saying that a network is a system in which all the nodes are agents. So when we talk about a system, you're talking about not just the humans and the projects and the orgs and all of that. You're talking, or the land or whatnot. You're also talking about ideas. You're talking about skills and capabilities, knowledge bases, abstract feelings, etc. And so the network is more like the food web in ecological systems. And the resource flows between may not be, I mean, some of it is prey and predator in this day and age, and probably since the campfires. But some of it is what are the resource flows in the network. And that can be, care as well as money or something tangible. But really convening systems to me means how do we look at the struggles that each network of people are grappling with and understand how and where our struggles connect. So you
Mm.
could bring it together like a potluck, just, hey, show up and bring what you want. And then you end up with like a whole table full of desserts and a bunch of chips and I don't know what. But then there's also like a little bit more mindful, almost like a community Thanksgiving where you're like, I'll bring the green beans. And like, what
Mm.
is the difference there? And for me, it's been really helpful to have a community zoom out and see all of the table and all of the ingredients that they've all brought, but also to then zoom in and say, okay, these four people have their things touch each other, right? I brought the pie and you brought the whipped cream, and we're gonna figure out how to put those together, or not get in each other's way as we work on our work. So it's almost like the whole reason to convene systems isn't to overwhelm people with all of the messiness, although that comfort with messiness is very important. It's to allow them to focus on where they belong with confidence, so
Mm.
that they know that in the network, somebody is taking care of the feedback loop that's 2 jumps away from me. And I know that they're working on it in a way that if there's some sort of process which comes down to a rhythm of communication across the system or the network that allows people to see, oh, hey, I better talk to these folks that I didn't talk to
Yeah.
at the last gathering because I'm bumping into their work. So how do we set up those processes of
Yeah.
noticing?
Yeah. Thank you, Christina. I'm putting on my host hat I would love to invite Benjamin, the poet. Benjamin is not a professional poet, but this is the role that we design in this form of dialogue called the poet. And the poet is sensing into what's in the chat from the audience. Questions, how would you like to push this conversation deeper? And the poet, of course, has his or her or their own take and their own, desires. And so I just want the poet to channel whatever you're feeling, you're sensing at this moment. Um, and please put yourself into the spotlight so that you join the fishbowl and, yeah, for a few minutes.
Ooh, I'm in the party. How's my audio?
Yeah, it's great.
Good. Okay, cool. Well, I've been taking notes both of what folks in the fishbowl have been saying and also what folks in the chat have been saying. I missed the last few chats, so sorry if I missed something juicy that you shared. What I would suggest and what I would like to do, I'm just going to reflect back first some of my notes. And I would invite everyone as I speak just to let yourself sit back,
Mm.
be held up by your chair, and just let the words kind of land in your body to see what they do. And then maybe I'll share a few of my own thoughts at the end. Kind of we'll see. Okay, so in no particular order, I'll just kind of be weaving between what folks in the chat and what folks in the fishbowl said. Symathesy, a word that Nora Bateson recently created that means mutual learning. Someone else in the chat brought up mycopunk principle from mycelial networks. We are all parts of a greater social superorganism. There's been a theme around messiness, uh, order, control, and mess or disorder. How does messiness feel? Anxiety, how much it takes to hold mess, the instinct to fix versus to leave to understand. What's the relationship between acceptance or equanimity and agency or choice? The resource of a calm nervous system, but then also sometimes it can feel like a calm nervous system is a luxury. We might not have a calm nervous system. What about this conversation is tangible to us? What does convening systems mean to us? It's definitely got something to do with the people, something about starting, about calling, about gathering. The metaphor of cooking was brought in. And how do we potluck together? Um, Nature was brought in. and the way that when we tend to think about natures or about systems, we usually are forming some abstraction, some simplifying model in relation to the inherent complexity that nature represents. Something around boundary. Who is invited to the convening? Is this are the participants a microcosm of the system itself? Do we recognize that we are holding a simplifying model of the system that we wish to be convening? Convening as an approach humans take to participating in an emergent order of wholeness. How do we look at the struggles each node, each part experiences, and where do our struggles connect? Can we focus on belonging with confidence and on building relationships? Yin and yang. Do we start with yang or do we start with yin? How does care flow in the system? Working with overwhelm, and perhaps as system conveners, our taste or aesthetic is quite important.
I'm overwhelmed. I'm just going to notice like, oh, the list. I'm kind of reeling at the length of the list and I'm struggling to keep up. And I'll just inject that into our system.
Thank you.
That was also the end of my recounting.
Yeah, I felt a slight tension, that just witnessing this exchange between James, interjecting, and then Benjamin. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Like I have different stories popping up in my mind, and it's just, um, yeah, I'm feeling the messiness, and I feel that both of you, Benjamin and James, are tending to the different parts in our system. Do you feel complete, Benjamin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the maybe the last reflection that I would personally make is that convening systems seems to be an idea very much from a human point of view. And I think of the more general that pattern that connects, to borrow on some of Nora Bateson's terminology, which to me seems to be the process of parts coming together to try to find how to participate as wholes that care for each of them better than they can care for themselves. And I suspect that when this happens in nature, it typically happens in an organic way because the parts come to find themselves belonging and being cared for. And so I wonder how this lens of parts learning to participate as the emergent wholes that can care for them may support the way that we as humans approach an idea such as convening.
I
Thank you.
have I have to say
One,
nouns to
one,
verbs.
1 second. So thank you, Benjamin. I'll invite you outside of the
Oh,
fishbowl.
wait.
Oh,
Before Benjamin leaves,
oh,
I want
okay,
to
okay.
respond to that because I think that's so close. And also the difference between a biological mindset where
Mm,
you kill the bird, name all the parts, and then you have your biological system of classification. And an ecological mindset is like, what if the parts that need to come together are processes? What if you're a verb, as Bucky Fuller, as E. E. Cummings, as I seem to be a verb. I am an is. The difference between biology and
Christina
ecology is,
are you just saying that in what I described, the parts could also be considered processes?
yeah. And if the parts you're talking about are humans in the systems that we're entangled with, if we think of ourselves and nouns, are we making the same error? And from a ecological mindset, I think we are. I think that the fundamental shift between, like a traditional scientific mindset and an ecological mindset is that web and the attention to verbs rather than nouns and flows. And, of course, it's a balance. You're not going to get rid of nouns, but we focus a lot on nouns the dominant culture.
Yeah, to put it more in concrete terms, um, for myself, there's a lot, like as a human, as me in my nonprofit, um, or in my work, there's just, I think of myself as Carol, have needs. Carol has roles, and my client also, convening their systems also think that way. This is the CEO of this net, of this, this organization. And then like people withdraw our boundaries of these are my, don't step on my toes, right? It's all this noun thinking. It's all I draw a circle and then see this is my part in the system. I identify with it rather than thinking about the I'm just tending to the processes that the system needs. And it's a huge difference. It's a huge difference to the egos, I think. Like to me, I equate the noun thinking with this territory protection and ego protection.
Hmm. Trying to remember all my grammatical terminologies. So there's the noun, but what can describe a noun better are the adjectives. Um, because a chair is a chair unless you give it some description. It's red, it's fluffy. But there's also something about the staticness of nouns,
Yeah,
even with those adjectives, that begs for something else
yeah.
to continuously apply it. Maybe there's this application of adjectives to the noun, and what is that process? So it doesn't become static. A chair can become a bench in the process. Now that feels so ambiguous as I'm saying it, but there's this picture of a movement
Mm.
of nouns becoming something into being. Um, but the other observation I have, if I may, is like I I appreciate what Benjamin offered, but for me, like sometimes my mind works is I'm stuck on the first thing that was said, semathesy, and then things become a blur um, in that because I'm like trying to process the first word, which is the mutual learning. Um, and in that process, I want the list repeated so I can capture the next one and then the next one. But there's something about the repetition that feels um, a waste of time at the same time, um, but is so much needed for others to process because maybe I process slow and that's just kind of the way I am. Um, yeah, so lots of threads there, but that's where the messiness of my head was going.
Yeah. So in mutual learning, um, yeah, in the kind of consulting jobs I do, I get paid to convene a system. But then by the nature of that transaction, it's like the convener needs to do everything, needs to come up with brilliant solutions and all of that. But the key to really convene a system is to turn everyone in that system into an active learner, into like learning all the processes that's in the system. And ah, like for me, like active learning is so rare these days. That's just my stereotype, like of like people oftentimes just feel overwhelmed in their systems and they are, yeah, they just focus on what's in front of them. And that active learning about the whole system is just, yeah. Is it rare? I don't know.
I want to do a meta check of where are we headed?
Mm,
I notice I'm feeling kind of disconnected
mm,
and a little bit on stage, but also I don't know, just kind of tired of the kind of the delicate dance of on stageness, and I have this sort of story in my own head of how we're kind of all playing nicely, and I thought the poet was going to come and lob some fire bombs or poke us or provoke us to go deeper in the second half. And I notice I'm hungry. Speaking of potlucks, I'm hungry for that, and I don't know how to get to there from here. So this is my move to invite something. I don't know what.
Maybe I can start. If you have an inkling of the what, James, what might that be?
Mhm.
Reminds me of a kid's book where a bumblebee goes around. Hey, you want to fight? All these increasingly bigger animals.
Yeah, I'll claim that energy. And the what, I'll say like, what doesn't work? What works? What have you learned? Where have you failed? Where are edges around
Mm.
convening systems? What are we struggling with? I know I'm in the thick of this. I'm struggling. I'm growing. I'm trying to expand my own edges.
mm.
And
Here's my favorite image on digging deeper. Whoops, wrong one. I'll just put it in the chat and then I'll link to the article. So we're good at getting to that psychological safety, interpersonal trust. Let's make safe spaces, blah, blah, blah. But you have to dig down. So, like, how do we notice when we think we're jamming and we're feeling like we know a lot and we can navigate the world? How do we notice when we talk past somebody? How do we notice our own limitations? How do we recognize when we're oversharing to mask something? Like we're pretending to be vulnerable, not actually
Mm.
being vulnerable. So I really love this for the different pathways to dig into around vulnerability, self-awareness, self-reflection, and then ultimately like that ability to work together as humans to truly cooperate and to take responsibility for our own shit, our own messiness, right? There's enough messiness in the world. Maybe we need to clean up a little bit around ourselves and not just embrace the messiness everywhere.
So it almost seems to me convening systems is not then just inviting the stakeholders to the table, but it's really about how do we expand these people's capacity of like what you just said, Christina, like at the individual level.
But and this is sort of where I want to take that digging in. How do we do that as a group? Like it's not about staring at your navel and becoming the best individual you can.
Hmm.
That was like the 80s New Age movement. Like it's how do we do this together? We have ways to organize we never have before. We've always had to do hierarchy to organize at scale across large distances. So how do we remember the web of connection that is more village-like or more tribe-like in this network of networks mindset where we can actually connect with people all over the planet?
Hmm. That gives me some traction. I'll throw out one thing that I found doesn't work for me, and that's convening a completely empty space. There's convening that tries to sidestep or avoid the role of the caller, the leader, the framer, and it uses words like co-creation and
Mm,
emergence, and oh, we're all going to be equal in a very egalitarian, and the caller, the leader, holding back, stepping back, leaning back from being I'm going to put something forth. I'm going to put a direction, an
mm,
intention, a vision in there, and then expecting other people to all equally kind of lean in at the same time into
mm,
co-creation. Like, I found that that doesn't really work. And that as the caller, people follow you and they follow your lead. And if you're leaning in, then maybe they'll lean in. But if you lean back, they lean back too. And that's one
mm,
of my biggest learnings over the last few years.
Reminds me of I don't know, like an older, early days of YouTube video where somebody caught someone dancing on a hill, just one person, making all the moves. And then another person just comes up behind them and starts dancing, and then all of a sudden, like, you see like a throng of people and they're just dancing because one person started dancing. And I almost feel like that's like the person who's bringing the vibe. um like that also helps to instigate, stir the pot, um invite people in, to kind of dance with you. And I think I'm like looking for like a personal story of like when, maybe I've encountered like failure, or what I learned from participating in something like that. um I feel like I have to go way back. uh but I used to once upon a time organize these events called hackathons, just for like different groups to like jam on ideas. And what I noticed is a lot of the teams that would kind of, pitch something, if they didn't have relationships to each other, they were kind of a little bit slower out the gate with, figuring what to put together. And it was that kind of soil making, tending to the relational soil here, that invited in, crazy ideas like the what ifs. And I feel like that curiosity is important to kind of this dimension of mutual learning. Like when we say semanthices, like there is no kind of default right answer, black and white. It's kind of the encountering, um, of different bodies, different thought processes, that really just spark something new, or at least like new in that boundary of interaction. And like that is just magical to see on people's faces, like when they become passionate about something. And I just remember that from the event, seeing people who traditionally weren't engaged to think like that, to kind of spend a few crazy 24 hours together, to kind of invite in something new. And the way they leave from that also is different from the way that they entered.
Yeah, so space for people to go wild together. And that oftentimes is difficult in the established system or organization. People have their roles. Again, people are associated with nouns. I'm the CFO, I'm the XO. And to actually invite them to let all of that go and go wild together. Then people are like, oh, I'm worried how people will see me, and I want to, appear a certain way. Um, yeah, how do we invite ourselves to to make space? Um,
So in between, if one cell tells everybody else what to do, that's hierarchy. And when what James just said doesn't work happens, when one person goes, I'm going to make space and do whatever you want. In biology, that's called a sponge. You can't like organize past that. You can't get liver cells, eye cells, heart cells, complexity at different levels, different scales can emerge. And so in between this like formal role that you're just mentioning and the wildness,
mm,
there are actually a collaborator just published this the other day, 20 social roles
mm,
that personalities just naturally play, and noticing these together and recognizing them and valuing them, I think is part of the thing, because part of systems convening is very, functional and effective and strategic and
mm,
recognized in this world. And then also part of it is very yin. It is the care work of networks. It is like motherhood, like nurturing. And it's invisible and it's hard and it feels squishy and it feels like you're not doing anything effective, you know? So how do we recognize and start to value these like variety of different roles that people play when they're collaborating with each other, when they're in a work context, when they're in a family context, when they're just strolling around their neighborhood or scrolling around their neighborhood online? They do these things. Some people capture information and organize it. Some people share it wildly. Some people comment all the time.
mm.
What do those things do for our samathsini? Samathsini. Blah, blah, blah.
I like the messiness. Yeah. So as the host, I'm inclining to invite maybe a closing round for this fishbowl. And I noticed Jeffrey raised a hand, and maybe some others. There will have a lot of people. I'm sensing the energy of broadening it up. But I'm not gonna record, to protect people's privacy. So I will let's have a round of closing of our conversation, and then I'll stop recording, and then we'll invite questions and everything to flow. How does that sound? All right.
My closing thought is, James, if we were in person, I would do some Aikido practices and just a little bit of almost like push hands. Like, what is this thing that you want to push on?
For some reason, the word faith came to me, not in a religious sense. Like if you're convening systems, there's sometimes you have to come in with a bit of faith that some things will work out and how in however form. That's sometimes surprising and unexpected. But you come because you have faith in the system for what it's seeking to do.
Yeah, that resonates for me. Um, it's almost as if the role of the convener is almost to allow like a larger system to speak through them, and just kind of like trust in the process in some ways.
And I'm checking out with an awareness of the the nesting, the fractal nesting of systems, and the always present interplay between the object level of what we're trying to do and the relational level of who we are and how we are together, and how very often those two feel like they're in conflict. We feel like, oh, we don't have time to stop and talk about the relationship or talk about the how things are going. We got a job to do. Uh, and in how my experience, like, oh, it's almost always worth it to pause the object level, uh, pop up a level, the meta, because like, oh, what is this system right here? What is this system of the five of us? What is it doing? And how are we doing it? And how do we feel about that? And how do we navigate that? And popping up and down the layers, the levels of the stack is kind of one of those crucial convening meta skills.
Yeah. Yeah, I had like a light bulb moment for me when I first invited you all to this topic. Is because I was convening systems for work for my client. And then after this conversation, especially the ecological view, really helped me to see, wow, I'm still seeing my client's systems in a way that is less lifelike. That is, I'm still doing that, even though I thought I was already, like doing something else. So yeah, so now I'm just imagining even the five of us, like like in the past hour, we're basic, if we're doing this well, we're basically channeling the life in our system, in this whole, how many people, 18 people or 20 people here, if we're doing it well, instead of blocking aliveness. And yeah, I really appreciate, like, for example, James, you were just like, how I'm gonna interject. I'm gonna, go down deeper what I want, uh, yeah, not staying on the surface. I just love those alive moments that we each channel, and it might lead to conflict, but it's better than than the sterile way of interacting. So yeah. So thank you. I'm leaving this feeling lots of aliveness in me and warmth in my stomach. All right, so I will conclude this recorded portion of the dialogue.